You are listening to Small Business Straight Talk with your host, Amber De La Garza. Amber is a sought-after coach, trainer, speaker, and writer who gives small business owners the straight talk on productivity, time management, business systems, leading your teams, strategic decision-making, and mindset. No BS, fluff, or overused jargon. Just actionable strategies to get results and succeed in business. And here is your host, Amber De La Garza, the Productivity Specialist.
Welcome, and thank you for listening to the Small Business Straight Talk podcast. Today is episode 389, When to Cut Your Losses and Why You're Not Doing It. If you're a small business owner who wants to learn effective business strategies, improve time management, and elevate productivity to maximize profits, reduce stress, and make time for what matters most, then you're in the right place, and I'm so glad you've joined me. Do you have something in your business that you know needs to go? Maybe an underperforming team member, a marketing strategy that's bleeding money, or a complicated system that creates more work than it saves, but you just can't seem to pull the trigger? If you're nodding right now, stick around, because today we're not just talking about how to recognize when it's time to cut your losses. We're diving into the real reason you're not doing it. And more importantly, how to finally break free from that cycle. Before we dive in, I want to invite you to take my Next Level Business Owner quiz. If you are thinking that all the things need to be fixed and focused on, and you feel overwhelmed with taking your business to the next level, then take this quick 3-minute quiz to find out what's most holding you back and get a curated playlist of the podcast with specific episodes that address those challenges. What is more effective and productive than having laser-focused resources at your fingertips that you can get real results in your business? So hit pause and head on over to amberdelagarza.com/quiz. Again, that's amberdelagarza.com/quiz. And now let's get to the straight talk. Have you ever looked at your P&L and thought, why am I still paying for that? Or caught yourself dreading interactions with a certain team member again? Or perhaps you found yourself explaining to your spouse why this marketing strategy just needs a few more months to work out. You're not alone. I've been there, you've been there, and you are not weak for holding on too long. Here's what nobody's telling you about cutting losses in business. The hard part isn't recognizing what needs to go. The hard part is actually letting it go. Because somewhere between knowing and doing, we get stuck in a loop of justification, self-doubt, and hope that maybe, just maybe, things will turn around. Today, we're going to talk about why this happens and what to do about it. Not with some oversimplified framework or magical questions, but with real talk about why smart business owners like you stay stuck in situations you know are not serving you. Whether it's an underperforming employee, a complicated system that's supposed to save you time but doesn't, or a service offering that drains your energy, we're going to explore why you haven't cut your losses yet and, more importantly, how to finally do it. We all know the obvious signs that something needs to go. When it's losing money, when clients complain, when it's clearly not working. But what about those subtle signs we rationalize away? The ones that whisper before they scream? Here's what I've noticed both in my business and with my clients. The first sign of something needs to go isn't usually financial. It's frustration. When something that should be straightforward becomes way harder than expected, that's your first clue. Think about that marketing strategy you implemented. It seemed easy enough at first, right? But now it's taking way more resources than planned, requiring constant tweaks, and the ROI doesn't support continuing. Yet, you keep going on because, well, you've already invested so much. Or consider how we do things the hard way simply because we've always done it that way. When we don't step back and ask, how can this be simpler or easier and get the same or better results? I'm going to say that again because, with coaching, it's all about the questions. And this is a powerful question to ask yourself when things seem incredibly complicated or you're reevaluating something that you've always just done without questioning. Now is the time to question it. How can this be simpler or easier and get the same or better results? In fact, I just asked AI that question yesterday. I was asking AI for a way to organize my ideas around social media. And I wanted to just have some ideation around it. And what it kicked back to me was so complicated and so overwhelming. It was this multi-step process with multiple sheets, and my eyes started crossing. And so all I did was ask it this very similar question. How can I get the same or better results but simplify your recommendation? We can ask that same question of ourselves in our own businesses. Oftentimes, we equate complexity with value as if business is supposed to be hard. This last weekend, I had my mid-year retreat with some of my coaching clients. And one of the things that I heard myself saying, not once, but maybe a couple times, was, what if it was easy? Or what if it could be simple? Because oftentimes the filter in which we see our businesses through and we're making decisions with is that we have this belief that it's supposed to be hard. Now, let me be clear. Business is hard. It is not just magically simple for some and not for others. But we can do ourselves a favor by asking and getting curious about pieces and parts of our business and how we can simplify it. Sometimes the most productive and effective strategy is to stop doing something. Not keep doing it, not do more of it, just stop. And I want to also repeat this one again. There are so many little pieces in today's episode that I really want to hit home for you. Have you ever considered that the most productive and effective strategy, I didn't say give up, I didn't say fail, I didn't say, just randomly change directions. I said strategy, meaning you purposely make the decision to stop doing something. When you decide to stop doing something, it is incredibly powerful. The challenge is that most business owners don't trust themselves to make these types of decisions. You may be second guessing your gut instinct, and I've got to tell you, I think that you should be trusting your gut instincts. I am very strategic. It is the way in which I see the world. But I have balanced that time and time again and leaned on my gut more often than not, finding that balance between gut instinct and strategy. And I think that if you can quiet the voices, quiet the second guessing, and really tune in, oftentimes your gut is screaming what it is that needs to get done. You wonder if you're being impatient, if you're giving up too soon, if you need to try harder. I get it. And those are great questions to ask because we don't want to be someone that shows up in our business to just give up. We don't want to be somebody that shows up in our business that is just impatient and on to the next shiny object. But for many of you, I think you're asking these questions and that is not your go-to characteristic in the business. You aren't just impatient. You aren't giving up too soon. And it's not that you aren't willing to try harder. But when you think those things like, I'm being impatient, maybe I'm giving up too soon, maybe I just need to try harder, and you don't answer yourself honestly, then I think you're on a road to more challenge and hardship than you need to be. I love that you're asking those questions of yourself. And you should ask those questions of yourself. Because if you honestly answer and you're like, yep, totally being impatient, then that's a different decision and a different strategy. But if the loop that's going on in your head doesn't actually get an honest answer, how do you move forward? How do you make that decision that needs to be made? And that's where we're going to dive into next, which is that, yes, gut instinct is powerful. But I've also found that having data becomes incredibly crucial to helping you make objective decisions rather than subjective ones based on hope or fear. And data, if you can look at data and not tell stories about it, but look at it as input, then it really will help you make objective decisions. And if you want to learn more and dive deeper into this, we actually just had an episode recently, episode 386, Turning Your Data-Driven Metrics into Revenue with Amy Tra. And I think that's a great episode to go back to if you're looking at just simply starting with consistently tracking data so that the next time there's a decision to be made to stop something, that you have something that you can lean on more than just the way that you feel about it, but with data. We've talked about cutting our losses in multiple areas of our businesses, whether it's marketing or a strategy, a system, a process. But I got to tell you, the place that this plays out most frequently and most painfully is with team members. My clients often know without a doubt, and when I say my clients, I mean in a coaching session, they will come to a coaching session and they know without a doubt an employee is not working out. But instead of taking action, they begin to blame themselves. They make excuses for poor behavior. They feel bad for the person. And I get it. We can lead with empathy, and we do care about the people on our team. They think things like, I worry about that I'm being too mean, or I'm not being considerate. I haven't given them enough chances. They convince themselves that they didn't communicate well enough, or delegate well enough, or lead effectively enough, and the loop begins, and they don't get off that loop without coaching. And so my thought was, this is a really great episode to do on the podcast, because I know that if I'm helping my clients get off this loop and move through decisions, I bet there's a lot of business owners out there listening that whether they know they're on this loop or they listen to this episode and realize they're on this loop, you may be saying some version of all of these things in making excuses on why you're not moving through executing on the decision that you know needs to be made. And the challenge with getting on this loop of making excuses and feeling bad and worrying about what you look like or feel like is that you are running through a fog of emotion and you're not being strategic or decisive. And it's really, really hard to see through the fog if you don't even know that you're in it and that that's the way in which you're seeing the situation. Now, I want to talk about some of the real costs that are mounting. And I'm not just talking about money, right? Like keeping an employee on is costing you money, that they're not being effective, efficient, they're not doing their job well. That is obvious. But I want to talk to you about the stress that this creates, about the mental bandwidth consumed by this one problematic situation. In fact, stress, I would rate, is almost higher and actually contributing to further financial costs because it's weighing you down so much and creating emotional distress. And it's the stress of knowing what needs to happen and being in that kind of gray area of not moving through the decision. And what I know is that when you get stuck in one area, it often slows down decisions and strategy in other areas of your business. And so when I say this is costing more than just that employee's cost, I'm saying you might not be doing the marketing like you used to. You might not be moving through other decisions in your business because you're like, this thing needs to be handled. Like, I need support first, or I need to fill this role first. And because I'm not moving through that decision, everything else slows down. And this also could be that you just end up doing tasks that are not your highest value activities to compensate for a team member who's not pulling their weight. And if you're not in your highest value activities, how are you contributing your highest value to growing the business? And you may be limiting new opportunities or growth because you've already feel overworked. You can't solve other challenges in the business because you yourself are stressed out and overwhelmed by the one decision you're not moving through. Here's what I want you to understand about this. Stopping something is not failing. It's strategic. And I mentioned this earlier, but I just went through all the feelings, emotions, loops, things that we tell ourselves, the excuses that we make from the time that we know a decision needs to be made in the business. And in this example that I went deep into, it's a team member. To executing on that decision, I need to keep reminding you that stopping something is not failing. It's strategic. It's strategic. It's smart. When you know more than you did when you started, making a different decision isn't giving up. It's growing up. Because we don't have a magic 8-ball. And if you do, please DM me. Let me know that you have this magic 8-ball and you've got everything in business figured out and every decision you make is the right decision and you never feel like you have to undo a decision. Like if you're listening, and I'm totally being sarcastic, my point is nobody has a magic 8-ball. We all have to remake decisions. When you know more or you have further clarity, you have the right to make a different decision. Most of what we do in business is an experiment. Some experiments work, some don't, and recognizing which is the mark of a successful business owner. And I've shared this in multiple episodes previously, and I can point to when I realized I needed to look at the business decisions in my business as an experiment. This one shift helped me move through decision making and get unstuck more than any other mindset shift that I've had. And so maybe today's episode, while we're talking about cutting losses and while we're talking a lot about mindset, perhaps the one shift in today's episode for you that you needed to hear is that it's okay to think of things as an experiment in the business. Because we don't have magic 8-balls. We cannot see into the future. We do not know how everything is going to play out. And so if you truly know that any decision you make is we don't know the actual outcome. We can predict, we can know based on previous history, we can get advice from other people on what could possibly work better than other decisions, but nothing is 100%. And once I realized that, I was no longer attached to an outcome in the way that made me feel stuck to a decision I already made. The question isn't whether you've invested time, money, or energy into something. The question is whether continuing to invest will get you where you want to go. And deep down, you usually already know the answer. Now, I have shared this with friends. My husband could probably tell you this trait about myself. I always say I'm a dog with a bone. So once I have my, mind and goals set or a strategy set, I am taking it to the finish line. Now, many people see that as a complete strength and are like, oh my gosh, that is amazing. I wish I had that. But just like with any strength, there's a dark side and a light side. And before I quite understood what I'm teaching you here today, I actually was in the dark side of that trait. And what that meant was if I had an idea or I had a strategy or I had a goal, I would not let the bone out of my mouth, meaning there was nobody going to be taking that away. The only thing I saw was moving forward to the finish line to accomplish the goal or finish the project or the strategy, etc. And that was not serving myself or my business. because I wouldn't pick my head back up and reevaluate. Do I even want this goal? Does this goal even serve me or my business? Do I need to tweak the strategy? Is the strategy still right for the business? And I was not asking those questions early on in my business because I was just utilizing what I considered was a strength and realized that unchecked, that is not a strength alone. The strength is having the right bone in your mouth. The strength is understanding that I could drop that bone and go get a bigger bone. I could drop that bone and go get a tastier bone, right? Like I could have choices. And that is not how I first started my business. And it created so much stress. It also created this feeling of not feeling satisfied. Because sometimes I would be chasing the thing. I would have the bone in my mouth. I wouldn't let it go. I would get to the finish line. And because I never re-asked myself, is this something that I still want? Is it something that actually serves the business? And I would get to the end and I would reach the goal and it wouldn't feel satisfying. So that's really what and why I created today's episode, was because of my own journey through this same thing of not holding on to things way too long, not wanting to let them go, and how that negatively impacted the growth of my business and my own stress. But I'm going to share with you what I have learned is why we do this and how I help my clients get through knowing something and moving into taking action. And I've learned this through working with hundreds of clients over the last 15 years and understanding that the gap between knowing and doing often is never about more information. Again, the gap between knowing something and doing it isn't about needing more information. Even though that's where many of us tend to go is, well, I need more information. I need more time. I need more data. I need more information. And that is just delaying the inevitable of moving through executing on a decisive decision. The gap between knowing and doing is often about what you are making that decision mean about you. For me, when I had an identity that I was like a dog with a bone, I was a girl that would achieve any goal. I always achieved my goals. How could I also be somebody that didn't achieve her goals? How could I also be somebody that had this great idea and strategy and let it go without feeling like failure? Well, this is how. I didn't need to actually make it mean that it was failure. I actually didn't need to stand in the identity that I am only valuable if I am the girl that achieves all the goals. So what was I making it mean about me? And I would bet that while you may not identify with you're a girl, a dog with a bone, and you're a girl that achieves the goal at any cost, and that's what everybody knows you for, there is some other identity that you may be holding on to and prioritizing over making a decisive decision and moving into executing. So when my clients struggle to let something go, it is rarely because they're unsure if, for example, the person is performing well or not. They often have the data. They have the feedback, they have the frustration, they have the experiences. They can see the missed deadlines, they can see the constant corrections, they're experiencing the drama. But they stay stuck because letting this person go feels like admitting they failed. Perhaps it's about failing at the hiring, failing at leading, failing at developing their team. What are they in their head and mind saying letting this person go means about them? Now, I'm giving you some examples here of things that I hear often, but I don't want to put words in, I don't want to have you use my words because your words may have nothing to do about failing. Your words might have something to do with something completely different, and it's not going to be a shock and it's not going to be a surprise if you just listen to the conversation you're having on repeat in your head when you think about moving through XYZ decision. For this example, we're talking about letting somebody go on the team, but you have decisions all around you that you are not moving through. And I want you to pause and listen to the tape recorder that's going on. And that is the story that you're telling yourself about yourself and why you won't move through executing on it. We tell ourselves stories to justify our inaction. Maybe I didn't communicate clearly enough. Perhaps they just need more training. What if I'm being too demanding? Other business owners seem to make it work. These stories protect us from facing the hard truth. And the hard truth is that we're not really protecting our investment. We're protecting our ego, our identity, how we want the world to see ourselves. Think about it. When you've poured time, money, and energy into something, whether it's an employee, a system, or a strategy, letting it go feels like admitting you made a mistake. And not just any mistake, but often a costly one. One that, quote unquote, a smarter business owner wouldn't have made. Have you heard yourself say that to yourself? That is just not true. Every business owner makes mistakes. Some are bigger mistakes and some are a lot of mistakes and everything in between. But every business owner makes mistakes. And so to make a blanket statement like a smarter business owner would not have made X, Y, and Z mistake is you lying to yourself. And it's creating a bigger and bigger gap between the knowing and the executing on what you know needs to be done. So instead, we double down. We invest more time trying to fix what's broken. We throw good money after bad. We exhaust ourselves trying to make it work because somehow that feels better than admitting it won't work. Here's the truth nobody is talking about. The sunk cost fallacy isn't really about the money you've spent. It's about who you think you are. It's about your identity as someone who makes good decisions, who doesn't give up, who can make anything work if you just try hard enough. But what if I told you that many very successful business owners I know aren't the ones who never make a mistake? In fact, they make a lot of mistakes. They're the ones who recognize mistakes quickly and correct course without making it mean something about their worth as a business owner, as a leader, as a woman, as a man. It doesn't need to mean anything. The difference between knowing intellectually that something needs to go and being emotionally ready to let it go is massive. You can have all the data in the world, but until you separate your business decisions from your personal identity, you'll stay stuck. I would say stuck and stressed, honestly. I see this particularly with long-time business owners who have done things a certain way for years. For years, they've done things a certain way over and over again, and often just because. Changing or stopping something feels like admitting that, for example, the last 5 years were quote unquote wrong. But they weren't wrong. They were right for that season. But oftentimes, what got you here won't get you there. And it's not failing, it's growth. The emotional readiness to act comes from when you realize that holding on is actually more harmful to your identity than letting go. When we keep that underperforming employee that makes you feel like a weak leader, how is that actually helping you and your own vision of yourself? When maintaining that complex system that makes you feel scattered, disorganized, unprofessional, overwhelmed, how is that helping you with your own identity or experience of being a business owner? When continuing that marketing strategy that you say, it should have been easy and everyone else is doing it, but what is it really making you feel like on a daily basis? Maybe like you're throwing money away. Holding on to things too long is more harmful to your identity than letting it go. The shift happens when the pain of staying the same becomes greater than the fear of making a change. So if you're sitting there knowing what needs to go but unable to pull the trigger, stop asking yourself for more data or better strategies. Start asking yourself, what am I afraid this decision says about me? Because once you answer that, you can separate your worth from your business decisions. And here's the reframe that changes everything for my clients. Asking yourself, what does the business need? It is a short and powerful question. But if you ask yourself, what does the business need? You are separating yourself, your needs, your feelings from the identity of what the business needs. Now, I ask this question so often from my clients when I see that they're struggling to follow through on a decision, to execute on that decision. Because oftentimes all we need to do is ask and answer this question. And then what happens is we rise up and we're like, yeah, that's what the business needs. Okay, if I can't do this for myself, I'm going to do it for my business. Because our businesses do feel like an extension of us. We have invested blood, sweat, and tears into our business. And I often say, if you want Mama Bear to come out, it's either my kid or it's my business. And I will advocate and I will fight and I will protect my business as I do my child. So if you can separate yourself and ask, what does the business need? Answer that, and I bet you're more confident about moving through that decision. This question creates the distance necessary to make objective decisions. It shifts you from personal identity to CEO thinking. When you ask this question, suddenly the answer becomes crystal clear. The business needs a team member who performs. The business needs a marketing strategy that generates an ROI. The business needs a system that creates efficiency, not complexity. When you stop making business decisions about you and start making them about what the business needs to thrive, everything changes. You're no longer a business owner who's failing at making something work. You're a CEO making strategic decisions for the health and growth of your business. Here's what I want you to take away from today. Recognizing when to cut your losses isn't about being a quitter. It's about being a strategic business owner who values progress over perfection. And the subtle signs, the mounting frustration, the complexity that serves no one, the drain on your energy, they're not weaknesses to ignore. They're data points guiding you towards a better decision. And when you find yourself stuck between knowing and doing, remember that the gap isn't about intelligence or business acumen. It's about what you're making those decisions mean about you. The business owners who thrive aren't the ones who never make mistakes. They're the ones who correct course quickly and without drama or self-judgment. So the next time you're holding on to something that's not serving you, ask yourself that game-changing question. What does the business need? Because when you shift from protecting your ego to serving your business, the right decision becomes crystal clear. Your business needs you to be courageous enough to let go of what is not working so you can create space for what will. Look, I know this isn't easy. Letting go of something you've invested in, whether it's your time, money, or hope, feels like admitting defeat. but it's not. It's making room for what actually works. I have loved having you listen to this episode of the Small Business Straight Talk podcast, and I sure hope you found this conversation to be incredibly insightful, valuable, and a bit empowering to know that you are not alone and that you can do it differently. But I need to be straight with you. No change, no change. Without taking action, nothing will change for you or your business. So here's my ask. Within the next 48 hours, ask yourself this question about one thing in your business that's been nagging you. What does your business need? Not what you need, not what makes you comfortable, not what protects your ego. What does the business need? Then, the true magic and ask of today's episode, and the most important part, act on the answer. Even if it's just the first small step. Send the email, schedule the conversation, cancel the subscription. Whatever it takes, take one concrete action that honors what your business actually needs to thrive. And as we close out, if today's conversation is something that hit home with you, imagine having a business coach that is right beside you, strategic partnership, and helping you navigate these types of situations. This is the perfect example of where strategy and mindset come into play. Having someone look at your business from the outside in with clarity and experience, and also really understanding where you've been and where you want to go to help you move faster, feel confident as a leader in the decisions that you're making, and create more opportunity for growth. That is exactly what I do for my clients. So if you want to find out more about my coaching program, head on over to amberdelagarza.com/coaching. You can schedule a discovery call to find out if working together is the next right step for you and your business. And in fact, I didn't even script this one, but in fact, I would say, what does your business need? And if the answer comes up that you think you might need a strategic partner, a business coach, someone that can walk alongside you on this entrepreneurial journey, then please go schedule that discovery call today. And if you are new here, I just want to say welcome. Thank you so much for tuning in. Be sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss another episode. And if you have listened to today's episode and you thought, oh my gosh, I have a friend, I have another business owner, I have someone that I am thinking of that I think could utilize and enjoy today's episode, then be sure to share it with them so that they can tune in. So that's my straight talk for today. Until next time, have a productive week.